The Belgian Air Force had to do something about it.
Massive triangular-shaped craft hovering in the sky. Many around the world claim to have seen them during the Cold War. But what were they?
The government takes them very seriously, not because they necessarily believe they're extraterrestrial, but they are concerned about the Soviet Union and the threat it poses.
At the height of international turbulence, something caused even more distress. A black triangle frenzy.
We don't know what it is. It doesn't mean extraterrestrial. It doesn't mean government cover-up. It doesn't mean your pet theory is right. It just means I don't know.
Unidentified flying objects. They've been reported in our skies for decades. Thousands of UFO sightings have been documented in official government files. Most have logical, scientific explanations, yet some cases remain unexplained, classified, unidentified. Can newly released files reveal the truth behind these UFO encounters? March 1990. An Air Force base in Belgium scrambles 2 F-16s to investigate a possible violation of Belgian airspace. Yves Milbergs is one of the pilots ordered to address the threat.
The operations center told us something was going on with the UFO over Belgium.
Captain Milbergs has been briefed with a description of the object given by an eyewitness on the ground.
It was a kind of object of triangular shape, okay, with lights on the edge, kind of dome on top, moving really slowly without noise, and sometimes accelerating very fast beyond supersonic speeds. The order was to intercept and eventually identify those objects.
The Belgian Air Force report presents an exact timeline of the evening. 12:30 a.m. Milbergs makes radar contact 20 nautical miles from Beauvechine Air Force Base. It appears to be moving at 740 knots.
So we picked up the target the first time at about 20 miles. We had a radar contact, so we could see on the radar a blip.
This is the actual radar recording from Captain Milbergs' F-16. The square at the top is the target.
Which was, in fact, the confirmation that there was something in the air at that moment. And it was the same contact as the ground station observed as well.
But just as the 2 F-16 pilots think they are closing in, the target vanishes. If it was an intrusion by a foreign military, it escaped before being seen. If it was a false radar reading, there was nothing there in the first place. But some believed in another possibility. In the months leading up to this incident, hundreds of Belgians had reported seeing triangular aircraft. It all started in the small town of Eupen, just 6 miles from the German border. 2 police officers on patrol reported something unusual in the sky.
They noticed very bright lights hovering over an open field. And these bright lights were fixed to some type of triangular platform, as they described it.
Author and UFO researcher David Marlow investigated this incident.
The object encompassed the field that was near their vehicle. It was silent.
They claimed the object then began to move slowly toward the town.
They were gobsmacked as far as what they were looking at. They had no frame of reference for this.
The initial 2 police officers who saw it light up the field, they followed it for a while.
Author and investigative journalist Leslie Kane has interviewed many who claimed to have seen something that night.
And it ended up over Lake Gillespie. They watched the thing for over an hour sitting above Lake Gillespie. And what they saw was something extraordinary. The craft was releasing a red light ball that was shooting out horizontally along the surface of the lake, and then it was pulling it back in.
Then, the two officers say they saw a second triangular UFO rising up over a row of trees by the edge of the lake, then hovering silently alongside the first UFO.
They contacted the dispatcher in Yupon, and he laughed and said it might be Santa Claus, coming in to land. And they stated that we're not joking, this is something very serious.
During this period, there were many reported sightings of unidentified triangular craft all over the Belgian countryside, but no photos, video, or other hard evidence to confirm their existence. Instead, many of the witnesses sketched what they claimed to have seen. The drawings are strikingly similar. Ever since the sightings in Belgium, there have been thousands of similar reports all over Europe and North America. Black, delta-shaped flying objects that became known as black triangles. Could these sightings be explained by some natural phenomena? Could they be a case of mass delusion? Or do they defy explanation?
In the 90s, black triangles usurped saucers for a while.
Michael Shermer is a science author and publisher of Skeptic magazine.
People say, well, I saw these weird lights in the sky. It was 6 p.m. It was just getting dark and it was sort of triangular shaped and it zoomed off. So that makes a big story.
After the first sightings over Eupen in November of 1989, Belgian UFOs became the media topic of the day. Reporters asked if alien spacecraft were hovering over the country. Amid the increasing publicity, Belgians made over 500 claims of UFO sightings. Authorities found themselves in a UFO wave. Some call it a frenzy, a phenomenon that some say has more to do with psychology than reality.
UFO sightings are by definition unidentified, so we don't know what they are.
Dr. Roger Lanius is an associate director at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum.
One of the things that tends to happen with many people is that when they believe certain things are out there, any piece of evidence that they can come up with that might confirm that, they latch upon.
Psychologists call this confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out only information that confirms one's beliefs.
Confirmation bias is the tendency to find confirmatory evidence for what you already believe and discount or rationalize disconfirming evidence. That is, we remember the hits, we forget the misses.
But whether the black triangles were real or imagined, the reports kept coming. Even with no hard evidence, officials took notice. Which is perhaps why the Belgian Air Force scrambled 2 F-16s to investigate a report at the height of the UFO wave. It was an attempt to pin down some hard evidence and confront what could have been a tangible threat.
The Belgian Air Force was concerned about this and had to take some action because there was something invading their airspace.
The night's events began to unfold before 11 p.m. An off-duty police officer reported seeing 3 strange lights over the town of Jean-Bleu. He said the lights form a triangle.
The Belgian wave really came to a head on the night of March 30th, 1990. This involved sightings being reported by the citizenry in several municipalities.
The Belgian Air Force report states that at 11 p.m., the Glans Control Reporting Center received a phone call from the policeman reporting the strange lights in the sky. 15 minutes later, their military radar picked up an unidentified object moving very slowly at 25 knots towards the west. Then, another Air Force radar station center confirmed the target in the same position. Glans Control gave the order to scramble jets. Pilot Yves Milbergs picks up the target on his radar about 7 nautical miles away. He still can't see it.
It was dark, there was no lights at the object, and we couldn't see anything.
Relying only on their instruments, the 2 F-16 pilots moved to engage the target. If it's a breach of Belgian airspace by a foreign military, what Milbergs does next could spark an international incident. Over an hour after an off-duty police officer reports a strange object in the sky, two F-16s are closing in on their target. Captain Muehlbergs has a radar lock-on. He's just about to intercept when the target suddenly appears to take evasive action.
The target was rapidly reacting, changing heading and altitude and speeds.
The target starts to move radically around the pilot's radar screen.
The performance of that object is really outstanding. We had speeds going from very low speed until supersonic speed, so it was quite difficult to intercept that target.
The Air Force report says the pilots managed to lock onto the target 3 times, but each time it evaded them. The report states the object appeared to accelerate from 150 to 970 knots, or almost 1,200 miles per hour, in just a few seconds.
We could manage to close in, and the closest distance we could achieve was 5 nautical miles.
The pilots made 9 attempts to intercept the object, but they never actually saw it with their own eyes. It existed only on radar.
That's basically an unidentified object. What is that object? Because so far we still don't know.
But Belgian officials still needed an explanation for the numerous eyewitness reports. They turned to Air Force Chief of Operations, Colonel Wilford de Brouwer, who proposes a theory.
The only thing he could think about was that it could be some kind of stealth technology from America.
It's conceivable that some of them might be testing programs for exotic types of flying vehicles. That has happened in the past. There were sightings, for instance, in the 1970s and early 80s, before the programs were revealed, of stealth technology that was being tested.
This Department of Defense intelligence report reveals that Colonel de Brouwer contacted officials in the United States about 2 top-secret stealth planes. The F-117 Nighthawk and the B-2 stealth bomber. They are both black and have an unusual triangular shape. Is it possible that one of these aircraft was behind the eyewitness reports of that night?
He was informed very clearly that it was not. And this is written up in an official American document, that the Americans informed him that it was not one of theirs.
Either it was a straight denial, or the Pentagon was hiding the test of a secret aircraft.
It's always a remote possibility that something that people see in the sky could be a classified program under test.
Bill Sweetman is an aviation writer and expert in top-secret military projects.
The late 80s were a time when the black project world was expanding very fast.
Could the Americans have been secretly testing new aircraft in that area?
The triangles could conceivably be aircraft. There have been aircraft designs studied that look like that.
Belgium's location near the eastern front of the Cold War could have made it an enticing test site.
There might be a few reasons why you'd test a secret aircraft outside the US. You might want to test it against different defensive systems. You might want to fly close to the former Soviet Union and just see if anything would pick it up.
If the sightings were of top-secret American aircraft, the U.S. might officially deny their existence, even to their allies. With the public demanding answers, Colonel de Brouwer made an unprecedented move and called a press conference. He qualified his statement with many ifs, as he could not rule out a radar error.
L'objet, s'il y en a eu un, a accéléré à une vitesse qui était tout à fait en dehors du domaine de vol d'un avion conventionnel.
The Belgians released the radar recording from the cockpit of Captain Muehlberg's F-16 and invited expert interpretation of what can be a fickle technology.
Radar is generally reliable, but like any other technology, there's going to be a residue of anomalies of stuff that happens we can't explain. And so like with everything else in science, what do you do with that residue of anomalies? Nothing. We just can't explain everything. So a radar operator sees a blip is there, the blip is gone, what was it? I don't know.
So what caused the blip on the radar that night?
So what we're seeing here is the radar data collected from the F-16 radar.
Dr. Raviraj Advi is an engineering professor who specializes in radar signal processing. His first question is if the target was an artifact of weather.
I don't believe so, because this is not consistent with the profile of something that would be natural.
Dr. Odby consults a graph of the radar data.
We see that the target falls down to about 6,000 feet, but then it rapidly gains height and then starts falling at an extremely rapid rate to the point where it almost crashes into the ground. At the same time, it's making incredible changes in speed. The speed jumps from about 175 knots to about 600 knots in less than a second. That is an insane acceleration that just doesn't seem physically possible. It then does another jump. Right at the end, it's moving at 1,000 knots toward the ground. We haven't recovered any debris from any crashes, right? But it should have crashed.
The extreme acceleration captured on the F-16's radar is beyond the performance of any known aircraft. But Dr. Odby may provide an answer to what Captain Muehlberg's pursued that night. His examination suggests not an alien spacecraft, but a military hoax.
It is my feeling that this is a fake target created by an electronic countermeasure system to spoof this radar.
It's a technique known as radar jamming.
This kind of technology is used by military defense applications. They are used to create false targets so that an enemy radar believes that there are many aircraft out there while there are really none.
It's a fascinating theory and could explain this particular incident, especially since the flight crew never actually saw an object.
We still don't know exactly what happened that day, that's for sure. We know what didn't happen, that's for sure. It was not a meteorological phenomena, it was not a helicopter, it was not a prototype and stuff like that. But it's still unidentified object so far.
After the Air Force incident ended with nothing but odd radar readings and unanswered questions, Black Triangle sightings decreased. The frenzy in Belgium died down. But 3 years later, there was another mysterious incident, this time in Britain.
I think within hours, it was clear that we really did have a staggeringly significant event on our hands.
"140 miles northeast of London, exactly 3 years after the sightings in Belgium, 2 Royal Air Force policemen are on patrol outside the RAF airbase in Cosford. According to their report,
A patrol of Air Force police stopped their car, got out, and looked directly overhead. They saw 2 bright white lights, but they weren't able to ascertain whether or not they were separate objects or lights on the underside of a much bigger craft.
the 2 corporals return immediately to base and file this report. It is the earliest account of the strange events of the night, events that became known as the Cosford incident.
This is RAF Cosford, where the UFO sighting actually took place.
In 1993, Nick Pope worked for the British Ministry of Defence, investigating unidentified flying objects.
My job was to research and investigate all sightings reported to the Ministry of Defence to see if there was evidence of any potential threat to the United Kingdom.
This is Pope's official Ministry of Defence report. It documents the most prolific wave of UFO sightings in British history.
This sighting at Cosford really kick-started an investigation which was to bring in dozens and dozens of other reports, including sightings of large triangular-shaped craft.
It wasn't just military personnel who filed reports. 10 minutes after the sightings at RAF Cosford, there are more reported sightings 18 miles northeast of the base.
One family saw the UFO in a town called Rugeley. They got into their car, as I recall, and actually tried to chase this thing. One of the witnesses described this vast craft passing directly overhead. They heard a humming sound coming from it, and they thought that this thing was so low that it had actually landed in a field in a place called Hazelside. And when they got to the area, there was nothing to be seen.
There were also no impressions on the ground to indicate that anything had landed.
The RAF police determined that no military or civil aircraft activity had taken place that night that might explain these sightings. This was not just a UFO sighting, it was essentially a security incident.
As military police at RAF Cosford secured the base, just 20 miles away at a second military base, the meteorological officer on duty reported seeing a similar unidentified flying object.
He described it to me as a vast triangular or delta-shaped craft. He saw a pencil-thin beam of light shoot down from this craft and track backwards and forwards. He said almost as if it was looking for something. Then he said after a few minutes, the UFO accelerated away to the horizon many times faster than a military jet. And he said, well, look, I see fast jets on an almost daily basis. This was orders of magnitude above and beyond that speed.
While stories like this sound persuasive, eyewitness testimony is often unreliable.
Eyewitnesses misperceive things, they distort things, they retell things, and not just people that see UFOs, people that see anything. We know from research that, scouts are not reliable. Mine's not any better than yours, and, so we have to actually have physical evidence, or else we don't really have a case.
But eyewitness accounts were all there was to go on. 200 of them, over 8 hours, from all over southern England. Pope and his colleagues were left to sort through the stories, trying to find explanations that would account for this spate of reports.
One by one, we eliminated all the usual things that people misidentify. Bright stars and planets, satellites, meteors, aircraft lights, weather balloon launches. And the more of these explanations we crossed off, the more mysterious and exciting this seemed to be. And the sense from my colleagues and myself, who normally came at this from a very skeptical viewpoint, was, my goodness, there is something really bizarre going on here.
After a month-long investigation, Pope's team concluded that people saw some sort of real object. Despite this conclusion, they had no hard evidence to prove it, much less any idea of the origin or nature of such a craft.
One of our theories, of course, was secret prototype aircraft or drone.
Just as the Belgians had done, the British asked the United States government if it was one of theirs, a large triangular craft capable of hovering, and they got the same answer.
Now, the Americans told us we have no such aircraft and no such test flights have been conducted over the United Kingdom.
Still suspicious, Pope used a back channel to inquire if the CIA or other defense agencies might have been involved.
The American Defense Secretary was apparently incandescent with rage. If we say it doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. And we had to act very quickly to stop this flaring up into a full diplomatic row with our greatest ally.
With his investigation at a dead end, Nick Pope can only wonder what really happened that night.
I have no realistic assessment of what this could be. If it wasn't some secret prototype aircraft decades ahead of anything that's public knowledge, then I'm stumped. I have no idea.
Officials in Belgium and England were not able to come up with a feasible explanation for this rash of sightings. With only eyewitness reports to go on, there were limited scientific avenues to pursue. But soon, it would be America's turn to deal with mystery triangles.
I've got that object inside also. It's huge.
In St. Clair County, Illinois, Officer Ed Barton is on overnight patrol when he receives a call from Central Police Dispatch.
Well, this is a 6 call from Highland PD.
As he gets the call, Officer Barton is driving south on the main road into the small city of Lebanon. This is the actual police recording from that night.
The truck driver just stopped in and said there was a flying object in the area of Lebanon.
This recording presents a minute-by-minute account of the strange events that unfolded in Illinois.
It's very rare that we have official documentation that chronicles the wave of sightings as it was taking place.
Journalist David Marler is a member of MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, which investigates UFO sightings. In 2000, Marler looked into this case.
The overall tone of the recordings at first were somewhat lighthearted and jovial.
It was like a 2-story house. It had white lights and red blinking lights. Buster, could you check the area?
If I see it, I'm not saying a word.
Officer Ed Barton, he was ready to simply write it off. But then he noticed lights moving toward the east part of town. Upon closer approach, he realized that the lights were affixed to a large triangular object that was low altitude.
To be advised, there's a very bright white light east of town. I'll go there and see maybe it's an aircraft. It doesn't look like an aircraft, though.
In my personal investigation of the case, I spoke with Officer Ed Barton from Lebanon, Illinois.
This is the statement Officer Barton gave to David Marler 10 days after the event. In it, he says that the object hovered at about 1,000 feet, almost directly overhead.
Officer Barton stated, as this object was hovering above me, every aircraft that I've ever seen or know of makes some type of noise. This aircraft made no noise.
After several minutes, he claims the object pivoted and sped toward the southwest at high speed. He wonders if it's some kind of experimental military craft.
Would you contact Scott Air Force Base to see if they have anything flying in this area, please?
Scott Air Force Base is only 3 miles away. Officer Barton thinks it could be one of theirs.
It's heading westbound now. It should be really close to Scott now. Matter of fact, if the Shiloh officer looks up, they can probably see it by now.
The village of Shiloh is right next to Scott Air Force Base. At 4:24 a.m., Shiloh police officer David Martin responds to Barton's call.
2550, I see something, but I don't know what that is.
But just as he thinks he catches a glimpse of the object, it appears to suddenly shoot away at high speed into the distance. 15 minutes later, outside the town of Millstadt, Officer Craig Stevens says he spots it.
CENTCOM 6004.
Go ahead.
I've got that object inside also.
Are you serious?
It's huge.
6004, does it look like what does it look like to you?
It's kind of V-shaped.
Officer Stevens tries to take a photo of what he's seeing. But due to the freezing conditions, the Polaroid doesn't turn out. There appears to be lights on the image, but there's no way to tell if it's a real physical object. Days later, Stevens makes these sketches for David Marler's report. He draws an object that is distinctly triangular. On the same night, in the town of Dupo, a 4th officer reports seeing something. Plotting the 4 sightings on a map, one can imagine a flight path traveling 38 miles over a 1-hour period. However, all they have is eyewitness testimony. There's no tangible evidence to examine. But the media doesn't need hard evidence to publish a story. The so-called Highland UFO made headlines. Newspaper accounts may have been fueled by the British and Belgian sightings a decade earlier. Triangle-shaped UFOs were now part of pop culture, and skeptics believe the accounts color popular perception.
UFO frenzies usually begin with either a single sighting or a sighting that was witnessed by multiple people. And then it gets reported, and if it gets picked up in the media, then that can start to drive the number of column inches. Then what becomes the story is not the UFO sighting, it's the event surrounding it. And that's the beginning of a myth. That's how myths are created. The biggest problem with UFO investigators is that they almost all believe. They're not objective enough. They're too driven by what they would like to be true.
They do have a preconceived belief that UFOs are out there, that they are extraterrestrial in origin, and they are searching for evidence of that. And they are spring-loaded to find that evidence. Since I personally do not believe we are being visited by extraterrestrials, I'm spring-loaded in the other direction, and I'm willing to admit that.
David Marler investigates UFO sightings for MUFON, an organization that believes UFOs may have alien origins. Marler's research, like the Belgians and Nick Pope before him, began by trying to rule out the military.
I was mainly interested in seeing if the military was testing any type of experimental aircraft that might have been in the area. The fact that it was seen near a major military installation warranted that question.
The estimated flight path of the alleged UFO shows it would have flown within 2 miles of Scott Air Force Base. The police and military declined to comment. Then, David Marler took the investigation a step further.
I filed a Freedom of Information Act request with Scott Air Force Base, and I have the official documentation as a result.
In a letter dated 2 weeks after the event, the commander of Scott Air Force Base responded to Marler's questions.
They came back and stated negative, that they had no military aircraft in the area. They weren't testing or supporting the test of any vehicle in the area at that time.
Marler then requested the radar data, hoping to get at least some hard evidence from that night.
They stated that at the time of the UFO sighting, their radar systems were down. They were not operating.
Military answers are often elusive with regards to questions that could be prying into top-secret programs. So, with compelling eyewitness reports, but limited evidence to go on, Marler tries to connect the dots.
Initially, I thought it was military in origin. It seemed to be the most practical explanation. But when we look at the eyewitness testimony, when we look at the description of this large triangular UFO, it bears striking similarities to Belgium, to Cosford, and at this point we have to look at this information and come away with the fact that these witnesses are essentially describing the same type of object, if not the same object.
Bill Sweetman also sees a link between the objects.
There are conceivable aircraft that would account for some of the phenomena that people have described as black triangles, would account for some of the things seen at Cosford, some of the things seen at in Belgium. But most of what has gone on in the black world, we really don't know anything about.
Most top-secret projects tested in the 1980s and 90s have not been declassified.
I would think that there have been tens of programs over the years that have at least reached the flight test stage. We know of perhaps 2 or 3 that have been declassified. So perhaps 10% of what has happened we know about.
Could the reported black triangles turn out to be ultra-top-secret projects not yet disclosed to the public? Marler turns to the past to explain the present, digging into the historical record to shed light on the mystery.
When we look at the history of the reports of triangular UFOs, I knew that the reports went back several decades. I had no idea how far back they in fact went.
One of Marler's sources for UFO research is the U.S. military itself. From 1947 to 1969, the Air Force investigated thousands of UFO sightings out of genuine concern for national security.
The United States Air Force is constantly on the alert 24 hours a day. We're interested in anything that flies in our atmosphere.
It began with Project Sign, continued with Project Grudge, and officially became known as Project Blue Book in 1952. The 3 projects comprised the largest government investigation of UFOs ever undertaken.
This was an extensive collection of over 12,000 reports that the United States Air Force investigated, collated, and analyzed.
The effort was spurred by a glut of sightings during the Cold War, when a cloak of paranoia influenced everyday America. With international tension tripwire tight, the military took any reported anomaly as a possible threat.
As the Cold War is heating up in the latter part of the 1940s, we see a lot of these reports, and the government takes them very seriously, not because they necessarily believe they're extraterrestrial, but they are concerned about the Soviet Union and the threat it poses.
Project Blue Book's objectives were to scientifically analyze UFO data and determine whether UFOs posed a threat to national security. Of the more than 12,000 Project Blue Book UFO sightings, the vast majority were explained as birds, planes, stars, or clouds. 6% had no conventional explanation, and the Air Force classified them as unidentified. One file is known as Incident 398, a triangular UFO sighting in Baltimore in 1949.
The primary witness was an art student. He was also a former United States Air Force tech sergeant and World War II veteran, so he was familiar with aircraft.
At 6:30 p.m., the witness reports something moving through the clouds. He thinks it may be an aircraft, but not like anything he saw in the war.
He noticed not one, not two, not three, but numerous triangular UFOs during daylight hours.
Project Blue Book states that the eyewitness reported seeing approximately 15 to 20 V-shaped objects flying in circular formation. He remarked that they did not look like any conventional aircraft he knew of. They were black, very maneuverable, and capable of great speed.
These triangular UFOs exhibited unusual flight characteristics in the sense that they were darting about, moving in and out of the clouds, but when visible, they could clearly discern a triangular shape.
Being an art student, the witness sketched what he saw. He drew the shape of the unidentified objects as triangular. The witness contacted the Air Force to report the unusual sighting. Investigators arrived for an interview, and he presented his sketch. The distance of the objects makes it difficult to interpret, but at first glance, it appears to be birds. The eyewitness insisted they were not. Air Force investigators later determined that the objects were not detected by radar, nor were they seen by any pilots flying in the vicinity. Their final report could not confirm or deny the student's account, but years later, a new theory would come to light. In 1949, multiple witnesses on a Baltimore street reported seeing triangular UFOs in the distance. The Air Force report at the time was inconclusive. Now, UFO investigator David Marler is combing through history looking for answers.
When we look at 1949, we can look back now with a fair degree of certainty and know what was the cutting-edge technology of the time, since everything at that time has been declassified.
It turns out there was a top-secret program at the time that might fit the Baltimore case. The Northrop YB-49, or Flying Wing.
In 1949, Northrop had been testing the Flying Wing aircraft in various forms for a couple of years. And that was an extraordinary-looking aircraft for the era. It still is, really.
However, Bill Sweetman doesn't believe the Northrop Flying Wing could have been what those neighbors saw that day.
The Flying Wing was not a very maneuverable aircraft. Any hard maneuvering would cause the aircraft to fall out of the sky. It's an aircraft you had to fly very carefully even then. And if you've got people claiming that they're seeing multiple flying wings at any given time in the 40s or 50s, it just didn't happen. There weren't that many aircraft.
Marler's own investigation ends just as the Air Force's had in the 1940s. Inconclusive and unsolved.
When we look at the official investigation by military authorities, there is still no plausible explanation for these sightings.
Then and now, finding a solid explanation for such an enigmatic sighting is beyond reach. With no photographs, no radar detection, and only a handful of eyewitnesses confined to a single Baltimore street, it is one of the more questionable and difficult to solve cases found in Blue Book.
There's now declassified reports from the CIA in which their science and technology panels that were looking at these incidents would always come back to, we may not be able to exactly explain what was taking place here, but there's no evidence to indicate that this is a national security threat.
The Baltimore case was one of several Air Force investigations into black triangles during the 1940s and 50s. Another report in Project Blue Book documents a sighting within the Air Force itself. January 28, 1953, at Turner Air Force Base in Albany, Georgia, and signed by the commanding officer. At 9:35 p.m., an Air Force pilot was flying a T-33 jet just outside of Albany. The pilot was a seasoned officer with 11 years' experience and 3,100 hours of flying time. On a routine night flight, he reported something strange in front of him.
He thought, I'll increase in altitude. If it gets larger in my windscreen, then obviously it's something that's in the atmosphere and I should be able to identify it. If it doesn't get larger, then it must be a star or a planet. Before he knew it, the light which was above him was now below him, which immediately ruled out satellite, star, or planet.
In the Project Blue Book file, the pilot states that the object constantly changed color, from white to orange and back.
As if that wasn't strange enough, the object, in his own words, changed into an equilateral triangle. He then witnessed the triangle divide into two equilateral triangles, which shot off in different directions.
Aviation expert Bill Sweetman thinks this could be a simple case of unfamiliar surroundings.
We talk about people flying jets in Georgia in the 1950s. It's a pretty new environment for people to be flying in terms of speed, in terms of being single-seater at night, in terms of working with very, very crude radar. So it's very easy to see that somebody could become confused. Very, very difficult environment.
Complicating the investigation was evidence that the Albany airport had radar contact with something it could not identify. But the Air Force reached a conclusion that still surprises David Marler.
The Albany, Georgia case was concluded to be the planet Venus, a visual sighting of the planet Venus, which really stretches the imagination when you look at the fact that the pilot was able to see Venus below him.
This is another event that may never have a solid scientific explanation, but Marler proposes his own theory.
It really makes me lean towards the fact that some, underline that 3 times, some of these triangular UFOs may be of non-terrestrial origin.
Without definitive evidence, all that remains are theories.
In the absence of facts, what people do is they fill in the blanks with their imagination. In science, what we're supposed to do is just leave the blanks blank. You just keep working on it, and you don't fill it in with your imagination.
Skeptics argue that it's a matter of critical thinking. They say that the black triangle wave is not evidence of aliens, but evidence of how a series of unconnected events can become a self-perpetuating legend. Such is the power of a good UFO mystery.
The universe is massive. You can't even begin to understand how massive. And clearly, that would suggest that there are other planets that could support life, and probably do. But there's a world of difference between that belief, which I think most of us share, myself included, and believing that some entity or some several entities from out there are visiting us. There's just no good reason to reach that conclusion.
Bill Sweetman believes that the mystery exists only in the realm of human perception.
I think the most likely explanation for most unidentified flying object sightings is that people saw something that wasn't really there. People not being delusional, people not being crazy, people just being bad eyewitnesses.
Finally, Consider the long shadow of secret government programs. Only recently, in 2014, did the CIA suggest that many UFO sightings in the 1950s were indeed their own experimental aircraft. As they recently tweeted, "It was us." This information was so secret, it was even kept from the Air Force investigators of Project Blue Book. The thousands of incidents documented in Project Blue Book have long been declassified, so people can read every line, and often in between them, to formulate their own opinions. Without definitive evidence, black triangles may forever be debated and forever remain unidentified.
An unsolved UFO case is rather like an unsolved crime. I'm skeptical that we'll ever get a definitive explanation of this, but of course I hope that some new information does come to light and we finally solve the mystery.
Earth, our home planet, the only place in the universe known to support life. Yet could life forms from outer space already have paid us a visit? Could they even be abducting members of the human race? It may seem like science fiction, but has planet Earth already had a close encounter? Stories of close encounters with alien life are part of our culture. Every year in the U.S., there are thousands of reported sightings of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and some people even claim to have been abducted by aliens.
I'm a perfectly normal individual that's had rather extraordinary and odd experiences my entire lifetime.
Natural phenomena, or even military activities, can explain most of the UFO incidents, but some still keep people guessing.
There's no way that it was balloons or an aircraft or helicopters or flares. People actually saw a 1 to 2 mile wide craft.
Flying saucers have invaded our planet.
Skeptics argue that such sightings and close encounters are merely figments of our imagination, perhaps inspired by science fiction movies and popular culture.
If you have a dream about an alien in the middle of the night, what is your alien going to look like? Your alien's going to look like my alien, the alien we both saw on television.
Although even respected scientists admit that real aliens could have the capability to travel vast distances across the cosmos to visit Earth.
There is no law of physics preventing a civilization, perhaps 1 million years more advanced than ours, from reaching the planet Earth.
Some believe that there is overwhelming evidence that aliens have visited us, possibly on many occasions throughout history, leaving artifacts and messages ranging from crop circles to the pyramids.
I saw some strange objects, some strange lights. I saw some things I couldn't explain. They were definitely under intelligent control. For those of you that are skeptical, I would ask that you look at all the incidents. There are some very serious things out there. Some incidents really need some investigation.
In 1995, Dr. Lynn Kaitai saw lights she could not explain near her home in the mountains just north of Phoenix, Arizona. She had her camera with her.
I really concentrated on that top orb that was starting to disappear. It didn't budge. It just slowly dimmed, as if once it disappeared, it was still there. And I noticed an eerie silence, as if time had stopped. It was just extraordinary and very strange.
2 years later, on March 13th, 1997, Kaitai was also among the thousands of witnesses who shared a remarkable experience.
Thousands of people statewide were looking up purposely to the sky on a clear, beautiful night to catch a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet when this mile to 2 mile wide triangle craft traversed the entire state. I mean, it really went through the most populated corridor of Arizona, totally silent. This was a massive parade throughout the state.
Some people find it hard to dismiss the Phoenix Lights case because there were so many eyewitnesses. After a brief investigation, the military revealed that the lights were created by flares released from a squadron of aircraft flying in a V formation. Despite this explanation, some people maintain that the lights were otherworldly. Pyrotechnic expert Paul Mann has worked with flares for over 23 years. He believes that staging this event would be incredibly challenging.
I think you would find it very difficult to mistake a flare for what people would regard as a UFO.
Although he won't be launching the flares from a fighter jet, Paul believes that he can explain the difference between flares and the Phoenix Lights.
Here are flares, which will go to about 300 feet high, give you a constant burn, but you'll see there's a slight flicker in it. Anybody will be able to spot that's a flare rather than a craft. So we've got a shimmering red light there, lots of smoke, you can see the smoke trail. The pinpoint of light will give it away as a flare and it falls to the ground. It doesn't hover for hours. So for anybody who saw the Phoenix Lights, if it was a pyrotechnic that could last for so long, that was quite an achievement, and to get it to hold in the sky was something else altogether.
I know what I saw, and thousands of other people know what they saw, and it definitely was not flares. The characteristics are quite different from these orbs. There's no smoke trails, these are balls, these are orbs, and are in rock-solid formations. The data speaks for itself.
Some people believe that flares are an improbable explanation for the lights over Phoenix. Dr. Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic magazine, thinks the incident highlights the difficulty of judging the truth about UFOs.
People are poor eyewitnesses, all of us, judging the size, motion, and speed of objects in the sky, particularly at night or at dusk. It's very difficult to do.
Shermer has been writing about the unexplained for over 10 years. He questions not only the quality of the evidence, but also the reliability of human testimonies.
When somebody says, oh, it was 200 meters wide in the sky, how do you know? Was it next to something that you knew the size of already, and then you can judge it's twice as big as that? No, people just make wild-ass guesses.
These wild guesses include mistaking military aircraft, weather balloons, flares, and even the planet Venus as alien craft. Yet such sightings lead many people to believe in the existence of UFOs, despite logical explanations from scientists and the U.S. government. Ironically, official denials of UFO landings may actually encourage a popular belief in their existence because of a fascination with conspiracy theories and a fear of government cover-ups, particularly in the infamous case of Roswell.
Roswell. This is the mecca of ufology. Initially, the story given that it was a weather balloon was a lie. It was a lie because it was a national security secret.
It was a national security secret until 1995, when the government said that Roswell wasn't actually a high-altitude weather balloon, but a high-altitude surveillance balloon to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. This revelation only serves to convince the UFO community that the government are still covering up whatever did happen at Roswell.
So the ufology people said, aha, you see, we've been saying that they lie. We go, yeah, right, but they're saying what it actually is. Well, yeah, but that's a lie. No, that makes perfect sense for a Cold War atmosphere in 1947.
The mystery surrounding Roswell has been fueled by misinformation and the shifting official explanation that keeps the story alive. Yet sometimes, even the military themselves spot the unusual. In 1980, personnel at an Air Force base on the east coast of England saw a strange light in a nearby forest. Deputy Base Commander Colonel Charles Halt was on duty when he received a strange message from one of his staff.
When the on-duty police lieutenant came in and insisted on seeing myself and the base commander and talking to us privately, he was white as a sheet.
The lieutenant reported that a strange, unidentified flying object had been seen descending into nearby Rendlesham Forest. Colonel Halt and a disaster preparedness officer visited the supposed landing site. They recorded their mission as evidence.
Okay, what we do is we make a sweep. Here, I've got the gloves on now. Let's make a sweep out around the whole area, about 10 foot out. Make a perimeter run around it. All right, still there.
All the birds got quiet. All the animals in the forest were just silent. We approached a site where they said this alleged craft had landed. There were 3 indentations in the ground, about 1.5 to 2 inches deep, about 8 to 10 inches across. They were about 6, 7, maybe 8 foot apart, in a nice triangular shape.
Being cautious, Colonel Halt and his disaster preparedness officer took radiation readings with their Geiger counter. The levels were 4 times higher than normal.
We get a high reactive reading about 2 to 3, maybe 4.
Then, something moved in the trees.
A bright red light with a black center that was moving through the trees.
There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light here.
It appeared to be shedding something like molten metal, almost like steel coming out of a crucible. As we stood there in awe watching it, it silently exploded and broke into multiple white objects that just disappeared.
Many journalists and researchers claim that what Colonel Halt and others actually saw while in Rendlesham Forest was in fact the lighthouse at nearby Orford Ness. But Colonel Halt remains convinced that what he saw wasn't of this world.
I know what we saw, but I don't know what it was. And my own personal suspicions are that there may have been a craft that was damaged, injured, or it may have been a reconnaissance vehicle of some type taking a look at all the activity in the area.
In January 1981, Colonel Halt contacted the British Ministry of Defense, but never received an official response. He is convinced that his close encounter was genuine, and that governments cover up this and other UFO cases. Dr. Michael Shermer is not so sure.
Problem with government cover-ups like that is people can't keep their mouth shut. If aliens were really here and the government was covering up, surely some lower echelon person would say, I've got the story of a lifetime.
Even if governments were trying to cover up UFO incidents, people haven't stopped questioning the official explanations.
Either aliens exist or they don't. Either thought is frightening.
For any UFO to get here, it would have to travel across space from another part of the universe, light years away. Where might they come from? And just how would they get here? Has Earth ever had a close encounter with an alien civilization? There have been many supposed sightings of UFOs, but no definitive evidence of a visit. But whether or not aliens have dropped into our own backyard, many scientists do believe that they could exist.
I would be shocked if we were alone. It would be an incredible waste of space, considering how many galaxies there are. There should be lots of planets like ours with life on it.
The universe is about 14 billion years old and expanding at a phenomenal rate. It holds billions and billions of stars, far more stars than there are grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth. And some of these stars have planets orbiting them. There are plenty of places from which ET could originate. Physicist Lawrence Krauss believes that the most likely place for ET to call home would be on a planet similar to our own.
Life seems to form ubiquitously, relatively easily in conditions like this. So we would expect one simple way to find life would be to look for planets like Earth.
The problem is that any such planet is going to be a long, long way from Earth. Outer space distances are so vast, they are measured in light years rather than miles. 1 light year is a distance of nearly 6 trillion miles. That's the distance traveled in 1 year by a beam of light, moving slightly in excess of 186,000 miles per second. Light from our own sun reaches Earth in about 8 minutes and takes another 10.5 years to travel to the nearest known planet outside of our solar system. Any alien planning to visit us from this planet faces a round trip of over 120 trillion miles. The only way to shorten the duration of such a journey may be to go faster than the fastest thing we know in the universe: light itself.
In 1905, Einstein laid out special relativity. And in that theory, you cannot go faster than the speed of light. There's a cop on the block, in some sense, that says you can't break the light barrier.
Einstein's theory of special relativity suggests that there is a cosmic speed limit preventing anything and any alien going faster than the speed of light. However, in 1916, Einstein created an even more powerful theory, the general theory of relativity. It opens up the possibility that instead of beating the laws of physics, the answer might be to get around them. Theoretical physicist Michio Kaku believes that this holds the key to breaking the light speed barrier.
Space-time is a fabric that can be stretched and compressed and perhaps even ripped. That might give you the possibility to break the light barrier.
Einstein's theory proposes that matter causes space-time to curve. Imagine a heavy ball on a rubber sheet. The ball's presence causes the sheet to distort into a hollow. If a smaller ball is then dropped onto the sheet, it will spiral toward the heavier ball. Einstein theorized that space, like the rubber sheet, is warped as objects travel through it. And if space can be warped, then there may be a novel way to travel from one side of the galaxy to the other.
If you have a sheet of paper, a straight line is the shortest distance between 2 points. However, there's a loophole. If you are to fold the sheet of paper, then you realize the shortest distance between 2 points is actually a wormhole.
Some scientists suggest that wormholes are space-time tubes which act as shortcuts connecting distant regions of space. Theoretically, an alien using wormholes could travel between 2 parts of our galaxy faster than a beam of light could travel through normal space and time. It's a shortcut first described more than 150 years ago by a mathematician in Oxford, England. That man was the author known as Lewis Carroll.
Alice's Looking Glass connects the countryside of Oxford to a fantastic world called Wonderland. And if you were to put your hand through the looking glass, your hand would leave Oxford and go to the other side of forever. That is a wormhole, what we physicists call a multiply connected space.
Wormholes may be the ideal transportation network, but manipulating the laws of physics could bring catastrophic consequences.
You don't know how stable they are. It may be quite radioactive. There may be quantum corrections and radiation as you enter the wormhole, or perhaps it will close up even before you can enter.
It may be possible to artificially create a wormhole, but it would take enormous energy and advances in technology way beyond our imagination to rip through the fabric of space and time. But maybe there's an alien civilization so advanced that they can build these supergalactic highways with ease. Intelligent aliens may also have found another trick to navigate around the universe. Perhaps they can actually move space itself.
As far as we know, space can do whatever the heck it wants. Okay? It can expand in response to the presence of matter and energy. If we could somehow harness that, then in principle you might be able to develop something you might call a warp drive.
The alien craft would collapse the space in front of it and simultaneously expand the space behind it. In that way, the ship would transfer from one part of the galaxy to another without actually moving an inch. It may sound like the stuff of science fiction, but for some advanced aliens, it could be science fact.
I can show you with this balloon. I have a little replica I've drawn of the USS Enterprise from Star Trek. And just so you know the local surroundings, I have the sun here, I have the moon, Saturn. And what I want to show you is that the Enterprise could travel away from this star system and towards this star without ever moving with respect to its local surroundings. How can I do that? Well, if I squeeze the balloon at this end, then I expand this region of the balloon. The distance between the starship and these stars has increased, but the starship hasn't moved at all with respect to its local surroundings. And so what I've done is I've had space do the work.
Nobody knows how a warp drive might be powered, and Krauss believes that its use would be fraught with danger.
It may not be dangerous for the participants in the spacecraft, but it'd be pretty dangerous for everyone else. Because when you contract space in front of you, you literally crush everything between you and the nearest star. When you expand space behind you, you put incredible tension in everything around you. You'd have to have an interstellar highway where you cleared out everything in between, because otherwise you'd destroy basically everything around you.
Our own technology is nowhere near sidestepping the laws of physics. But an alien civilization that has evolved 1 million years ahead of us might already have found a way. Earthbound physicists who are looking for life take this idea very seriously. They have devised a system to categorize alien civilizations according to how advanced they may be.
When we physicists look in outer space, we don't look for little green men, we look for Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 civilizations.
A Type 1 alien civilization would be so advanced it could harness all forms of energy on its planet, including oceans, volcanoes, and even the weather. They would soon exhaust the power of a planet and use the energy of their local star. At this stage, they would be categorized as a Type 2 civilization.
Eventually, they become galactic. They begin to colonize entire star systems. They begin to have fantastic energies, allowing them to manipulate stars and black holes. That is Type 3. Perhaps 100,000 to 1 million years more advanced than our technology.
But where would our own civilization be on this scale?
We don't even rate on this scale. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. That's how primitive we are.
Our official rating is Type 0. We cannot travel across the vastness of interstellar space. However, a Type 3 civilization would have developed the technology needed to control space and time in order to travel freely throughout the universe.
You cannot rule out the possibility that an extraterrestrial civilization, perhaps 1 million years more advanced than ours, have the capability of reaching the planet Earth.
But any alien civilization developing ways of traveling across the galaxy to planet Earth still faces potential disaster. If they reach us at all, then the oxygen in our atmosphere, the very thing that keeps us alive, may prove to be deadly poison for our alien visitors. If an alien civilization has successfully learned how to control time and space and cross the interstellar void to visit Earth, they will face a serious danger: our atmosphere. It protects us from solar radiation, but it's a dangerous barrier for any approaching spacecraft. As an object approaches Earth from space, it heats up due to friction with molecules in our atmosphere. The heat burns up most objects, such as asteroids, before they reach the ground. NASA spacecraft use this friction to slow down as they re-enter the atmosphere. Heat-resistant tiles protect them from the intense heat. Without them, the ship would burn up. But some physicists believe that a technologically advanced civilization would solve the problem long before they reach our atmosphere.
I would suspect that any intelligent creature with an advanced form of space travel would simply slow down even before it reaches the planet Earth.
Having navigated our atmosphere and landed safely on our planet, the aliens face their next big hurdle. It's unlikely they could just step out of their craft. Earth's atmosphere would probably not match exactly the atmosphere on the home planet of a visiting alien. In fact, unless the aliens were adapted to oxygen, they would find the gas extremely poisonous.
If aliens come to Earth, you wouldn't expect them to just walk out of their spacecraft and breathe the air and start eating apples and oranges.
Here in the Mojave Desert in Nevada, NASA's Space Science Division studies how Earth's basic organisms live in extreme environments. From this, they hope to ascertain how different species might survive potentially hazardous conditions. Leading the research is Dr. Chris McKay.
We take for granted that life needs oxygen, and we all need it. Plants and animals need oxygen. But we have developed very special machinery and enzymes for detoxifying oxygen. Oxygen is intrinsically poisonous.
But would evolution have happened in the same way on the home planet of an alien visitor? Would they have evolved to cope with oxygen?
In an extreme case, the fundamental chemistry might be completely different with different gases.
Dr. McKay studies samples that contain over 10 million bacteria. They reveal that some species here exist using totally different principles to the vast majority of life on Earth.
If we look at the bacteria, we get a glimpse of how strange chemistry really can be, how these organisms can be really so alien.
The strength of our sun poses another problem for visiting aliens. The energy from its rays supports life on Earth, but it can be dangerous. Too much sun can blind humans, burn us, or even cause cancer. For a creature from another planet, our sun's rays could be deadly.
You can imagine life forms from another world coming here and finding the UV light here to be stunningly bright and require extensive sun shields and sunglasses and other ways to protect themselves.
And then there is Earth's invisible hazard for aliens: gravity. A visitor from another planet might find Earth's gravity a challenge. Humans have grown up with it in bodies designed for 1G. If we subject our own bodies to extreme gravity, the consequences can be disastrous. Fighter pilots making extreme turns can experience forces as high as 9 Gs. That means that a 160-pound pilot feels like he weighs over 1,500 pounds. Anything above 9 Gs, the pressure becomes too great, and the pilot will black out. Aliens from a planet with less gravity would probably experience a similar effect.
Say the Martians came to Earth. Well, on Mars, the gravity's a third. On Earth, the gravity would be higher for them. So even if they were fit by Martian standards, they might find this high gravity a drag, but it's not hard to postulate and have the technology to allow them to operate in higher gravity.
A far less predictable danger facing a visiting alien is germs. Just as in H.G. Wells's War of the Worlds, simple bacteria might be deadly to visiting aliens.
The bacteria on one planet could have serious consequences for organisms on another planet. When the Martians come, they invade Earth. They kill off the armies of Earth with no problem, but then the bacteria on Earth infect the Martians and kill them. In the end, Earth wins the War of the Worlds, but not because of the prowess of human technology, but because of the biochemical diversity of the bacteria.
History has shown that there is good reason for visitors from another world to be cautious, and for us to be cautious about them. When the Spanish invaded the Americas, they brought a far deadlier weapon than their guns and swords. They brought smallpox, the flu, and other illnesses.
When those barriers were reduced and life spread between the New World and the Old World, there was a lot of death and destruction as a result of that.
We might contaminate visiting aliens, or they might contaminate us. This fear of infection from new species of bacteria also troubled NASA during the moon exploration of the 1960s. They placed the first astronauts returning from the moon in quarantine in case they carried deadly space germs. McKay hopes that an alien civilization exploring the universe would also be careful not to contaminate planets with their bugs.
One would imagine that an alien civilization with the technology to move between worlds would have the sense to realize the same problem and have strict biological barriers and controls. They wouldn't just land and go out for a picnic and spread out their stuff on another world.
It's clear that the occupants of an alien spacecraft traveling to Earth would face a catalog of dangers. First, they would have to survive the destructive forces within a wormhole, then avoid burning up in the Earth's atmosphere, and finally, protect themselves from poisonous oxygen or deadly germs. Perhaps alien visitors would decide not to take the risk themselves. What if they sent explorers who never age and who never die from deadly diseases?
The most efficient way is with robots. These are self-replicating nanobots.
Nanobots are miniature robots, minute and lightweight enough to be potentially invaluable in space travel. One of the major factors in traveling fast through space is weight. The smaller you are, the faster you can go. In fact, subatomic particles can travel at near the speed of light. So tiny nanobots may be the best way of exploring the universe. Scientists believe that it might be possible to create microscopic nanobots able to clone themselves. These would land on moons and planets and self-replicate, allowing an alien civilization to explore vast tracts of the galaxy without ever leaving their home planet.
Eventually, you would have a sphere of perhaps trillions of robots expanding near the speed of light, landing on moons, each robot creating other robots. That's the most scientifically reasonable way to explore the galaxy. That's how nature does it. That's how viruses work.
Humans are already exploring the cosmos using robots. NASA's Voyager probes are heading deep into space, sending back data as they go. And robotic rovers have explored the surface of other planets in our solar system. But because of their size, it appears that nanobots could be the most logical way to explore the universe. But so far, there is no evidence that alien nanobots have ever visited Earth. And even if they have, will we be able to detect them? The vast majority of people who claim to have had close encounters in fact describe not miniature robots, but living alien creatures, often none too friendly, and prone to abducting, probing, and experimenting upon their victims. An advanced alien civilization might be able to manipulate physics and cross time and space to visit Earth. But some scientists question, why on Earth would they want to? They suggest that beings capable of traveling through space and time would be millions of years more advanced than humans and would find life on Earth of little interest. And even if they do want to make contact, they might not be friendly. Based upon the human race's own history of confrontation, Michael Shermer, publisher of Skeptic magazine, has his own theory.
If you go by what happens here on Earth, we would never want to come into contact with ET. We would be eaten or enslaved or killed, because that's what happens here. So that's not good.
Even so, some people claim to have already had a close encounter with extraterrestrials. Some even claim to have been abducted by them.
The alien abduction experience is a fascinating one. These stories have all the earmarks of a very human kind of experience. It's a type of night terror. It's a bad dream.
Because there is no evidence, outlandish accounts of alien visitation are greeted with disbelief. So most claimants are keen to conceal their identity. One woman from New York, who we have named Molly, claims to have experienced repeated visitations throughout her life.
Probably the most strangest and disturbing memory that I have is of a dream with a white paw coming into my neck and placing a tiny little stick in it. And when I woke up that morning, I was very shocked to find a strange, painful lump on my neck. And when I felt it, because I thought it was a pimple, I discovered something hard in there, the shape of a piece of rice.
According to Molly, the tiny implant worked its way deep into her body, and before she could get medical advice, it disappeared without a trace. Another encounter that she vividly remembers actually involved being taken on board an alien spacecraft.
I recall being in, I'm going to call it a clamshell, but it was more like a scallop, and it had a top and a bottom, and I can recall being inside of it and the top closed over you. I experienced medical procedures with very strange types of devices. One of the beings was very tall and very thin and very insect-like.
Like most people who claim to have met aliens, Molly has no evidence at all to back up her story. And skeptics consider that experiences like hers are more to do with popular culture than extraterrestrials.
Most people just give the default explanation that comes to mind, which is whatever they've been seeing on television and reading in popular magazines and books.
Over hundreds of years, the phenomenon of visitations has manifested itself in a variety of guises. In the Middle Ages, people reported stories of angels and demons, while 100 years ago, reports spoke of spirits and ghosts. Many scientists, including Shermer, believe that a combination of sci-fi stories, movies, and real-life exploration of space encourages people to manifest their fears in the form of alien visitations.
The aliens are our angels. They are our demons. That's who we personify as these weird anomalies. We call them aliens because that's what we're into. We're in the space age, in the age of science fiction.
However, that does not completely explain what causes people to believe they have experienced a visitation. Dr. Michael Persinger from Laurentian University in Canada believes he has discovered a link between the alien visitation sensation and electromagnetic fields. He suggests that fluctuations in electromagnetic activity could stimulate a reaction in the brains of certain individuals and account for most alien visitation experiences.
The experience of a presence occurring usually late at night and either producing a mystical experience or a sexual experience or even a terrifying experience shows up in all cultures. And we now realize that this sensed presence is built into the human brain itself.
Persinger believes that it is possible to induce something like an alien visitation experience in almost anyone. He does this by creating a complex electromagnetic field in his laboratory and applying it to people's brains. To demonstrate, Persinger and his assistant place a volunteer inside a soundproof chamber. Electrodes producing the magnetic field are attached to the subject's head. Then he is blindfolded and the lights are dimmed. Persinger monitors his stats and waits for his subject to experience a feeling similar to that of an alien presence.
Mr. Booth, can you hear me?
Yeah, float with the experiences. If you wish to report them aloud, go right ahead.
Within minutes, the electromagnetic fields trigger a shocking reaction in the subject's brain.
How he describes it is going to be a function of his culture, his experiences, and his expectancy.
It feels like I'm dying.
At this point, Persinger stops the experiment. In this study, the subject is visualizing the presence in a terrifying way.
I've never had any feeling like that ever. It just made me feel a little trapped, and it hurt. I don't know, closest I've ever been to hell. It was an awful place to be.
The volunteer was extremely sensitive to the electromagnetic fields which stimulated his brain. However, this technique demonstrates the extraordinary power of our brain to turn our fears into monsters and demons, and even aliens from distant worlds.
Dozens of people who have had experiences that they attributed to alien abductions and experiences. When we put them through the chamber, they have a very similar experience.
The terrifying experiences induced in the chamber are caused by channeled electromagnetic fields. Persinger believes that abduction experiences in the real world are caused by electromagnetic fields created by natural phenomena, such as sun flares, seismic activity, and changes in atmospheric conditions. And it's thought that our common physiology and global culture is responsible for the similarity in the accounts.
Inevitably, we're all going to have similar experiences because our brains are wired that way. We'll see the same kinds of illusions, we'll have the same kinds of hallucinations, and so on.
The role of electromagnetism in alien experiences is far from proven. Some researchers suggest that sleep paralysis or conditions like post-traumatic stress are to blame. But until we've made contact with ET, we may never know if aliens are all in the mind or not. And if ET did reveal itself, there could be another barrier to overcome: language. It may be that aliens don't choose to talk with us at all. They may decide to talk to one of the other species that inhabits the Earth. And that could be whichever species they consider possesses the most intelligent language. It may be possible for aliens to cross the interstellar void, to land on Earth, and to adjust for survival in our atmosphere. But communicating with us in any meaningful way may prove to be the hardest step of all.
We are arrogant to believe that they're going to want to actually talk to us and visit us. I mean, why? Think of ants in an anthill. If someone is building a 5-lane superhighway right next to the anthill, would the ants know how to communicate with the workers? The main danger is that these workers will simply pave over the anthill and not even realize what they've done.
In San Francisco, a few scientists are already studying ways of communicating should ET ever come to call. Leading the hunt is SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. For the last 40 years, SETI scientists have been monitoring the skies, listening for messages from alien species.
SETI is just about every field you can imagine applied to the search for life in the universe.
SETI scientist Lawrence Doyle believes that the key to communicating with aliens is first to understand their level of intelligence. And for that, he needs to establish how organisms communicate.
There hasn't been a search for extraterrestrial intelligence yet. There's only been a search for extraterrestrial technology. We plan to make it a search for intelligence by understanding the laws that create communication, so that if we get signals, we can tell it's a communication as opposed to random astrophysical processes.
By understanding the laws that dictate communication, Doyle can identify and separate real patterns of communication from random noise. To do this, he uses a mathematical equation known as information theory, which was originally developed to quantify the amount of information sent down telephone lines. Doyle uses it to analyze the complexity of a language. He calculates the interdependency of different words or sounds within the language. The greater the number of words or sounds that can be strung together that are dependent on the first word or sound in the sequence, the more complex the language. On this scale, English is a level 9 communication system. Doyle now plans to use the same technique on alien communication. And the higher the complexity, the more superior the intelligence.
Any alien or extraterrestrial message has to obey the rules of information theory. There's no other way to transmit information. And if we can measure how complex their communication is, it may be an indicator of how complex an extraterrestrial society is.
But information theory can only help Doyle understand the complexity of an alien signal, not the content. So even if he spots ET, he won't know what ET is saying. It's the same problem we have on Earth when humans try and communicate to other species.
If you smile at a wolf, it does not mean I'm happy. It means you want to pick a fight. If you smile at a chimpanzee, it means you're scared. So even a smile doesn't work. How do you communicate with an alien is a tricky point. We can't even agree on the same symbols of greeting among species on Earth.
Doyle has been using information theory to discern patterns and rules in animal communication and study their complexity. The results have been surprising. With his current data, Doyle has found that squirrel monkeys have a level 3 communication system, while dolphins have a level 4. So who does Doyle think might be the best candidates to communicate with aliens? So far, he's not convinced that either dolphins or humans have the necessary linguistic skills. But he has found a species on Earth with a communication level much, much higher.
Humpback whales we're majoring in because they look like they will have the absolutely most complex communication system, maybe on the planet.
Doyle's study of humpbacks is in its early stages, and so far, he has only studied their social calls. But it may be that when extraterrestrials talk to the Earth species with the most intelligent language, they won't talk with us. They'll talk to humpback whales instead. But despite listening to the universe for 4 decades, SETI has yet to discover a single confirmed extraterrestrial signal. To actually find real aliens, we may need to look in a different place. A place closer to home. Perhaps we should take a closer look at ourselves.
When you look in the mirror, perhaps you are looking at a Martian.
It's always amusing to me when I hear people talking about UFOs and aliens. But for me, it's the bacteria. There could be bacteria here that are really alien. Life on Earth could have come from Mars, and we could all be aliens here.
McKay and other scientists believe there's a chance that billions of years ago, alien bacteria were blasted from the surface of another planet and carried away in a meteorite. The meteorite might have eventually crash-landed on Earth, spilling out the bacteria, allowing it to grow and flourish. It's a process called panspermia.
If panspermia is true, you and I are aliens in the sense that our life did not develop on the planet that we're living now.
Professor Jay Malash of the University of Arizona has studied meteorites that have landed on Earth to see if they could have transported life from other worlds.
This meteorite is a piece of Martian basalt. Where it came from was a large meteorite impact on the surface of Mars. It's almost an ideal delivery mechanism.
It's ideal because the rock protects the bacteria from radiation and extreme temperatures in space. It would also protect it from the impact of crash landing on Earth. To test whether bacteria could travel safely through the cosmos, Malash and his colleague Wayne Nicholson conduct an extreme survival experiment. They inject a large block of rock with bacteria and take the sample to the Ames Vertical Gun Laboratory near San Francisco. The block's placed inside a large vacuum chamber.
Ready?
And Malash then fires a projectile into it at over 13,000 miles per hour.
It absolutely destroyed the rock target. It blasted into tiny fragments.
Amazingly, despite the rock being virtually vaporized, the bacteria survive intact.
If they could survive, it's not a big stretch to think that organisms on the surface of another planet could also survive meteorite impact and launch into interplanetary space.
The experiment shows that bacteria could not only survive the vacuum of space, but also the impact of landing on Earth. One theory is that bacteria from another world evolved over millions of years to form life as we know it. So perhaps all life on our planet is alien in origin.
We human beings, life, plants, animals, everything we see descended from that common Martian ancestor. That's a possibility. We may go to Mars and suddenly see, well, that's where great-great-great-grandma lived.
Because of the vast size of our galaxy, aliens, even highly advanced ones, may never have visited Earth in spaceships. All UFO sightings may well be no more than a simple misinterpretation of what we are seeing. And alien visitations, a product of our overactive imaginations. But aliens might have been here all along. We and all the species on our world could be the direct descendants of extraterrestrial life forms. In the strangest twist of all, perhaps we are the aliens.
Are we alone? To this day, the inhabitants of planet Earth have looked to the stars for proof of other life. But the truth isn't out there, it's in here. Since World War II, the British government has been watching us, watching the skies. Buried in the vaults of the Ministry of Defense are thousands of reports on UFO sightings, some left unexplained. But now, after decades of secrecy, the files are being released. And for the first time, the truth about Britain's UFOs is revealed. A near mid-air collision.
I can't speculate on what it was, I really can't. I mean, I don't know to this day what it was.
A World War II bomber's close encounter.
I don't talk about it too much to people, only close friends.
An unidentified object caught on radar. And new evidence on one of the most celebrated UFO cases, the Welsh Roswell.
If it could be shown that any UFOs were extraterrestrial in origin, people's entire belief system would fundamentally change.
Strange, unexplained stories that leave many wondering if there really is life out there. What are three popular word searches on the internet? Perhaps the first two are no surprise. UFOs have an incredible hold on the popular imagination, but few myths have involved government investigations, surveillance, and cover-ups. UFOs have. One person who knows just how seriously UFO sightings have been taken by the British authorities is ex-MOD operative Nick Pope.
From 1952 onwards, it was decided that there really needed to be a small unit set up permanently to research and investigate the UFO phenomenon. And really from the 50s right up until 2009, the Ministry of Defence did have a small project looking at the UFO mystery.
Pope manned the UFO desk in the 90s, helping add to the thousands of files the ministry had gathered for decades. Now that they're being released from the vaults, key UFO eyewitnesses give their side of the stories. And UFO experts, skeptics and believers interrogate just what the MOD was keeping secret. Dr. David Clark is the journalist who helped first persuade the MOD to release the files.
If you look in the files, there are thousands of unusual things people in the sky from right across the British Isles. There's absolutely no doubt that people see things in the sky that they can't identify. They always have done.
6th of January 1995. Two experienced pilots of a Boeing 737 carrying 60 passengers from Milan to Manchester report a near collision. It's an incredible sighting of an unidentified flying object which sends the authorities into a spin.
In the defence files, there are quite a number of incidents involving near misses between civil aircraft and unidentified flying objects. The most impressive of all was a report that was made by the crew of a British Airways 737.
Speedbird 5061, overhead pylons 9 miles.
They were just about to enter this cloud bank, quite a clear sky, good sort of vision. Suddenly, the first officer said he saw this object coming towards him like an illuminated Christmas tree. It was so low in its approach and so close that he automatically ducked, thinking there was going to be a collision. This thing just zoomed past, and immediately he turned to the captain and said, "Did you see that?" The captain said, "Yeah, I saw it as well."
Immediately, the pilots radioed